Welcome back. You're watching Luck on Sunday. Cornelius Lysaght is my guest, and here are this week's talking points. Now, clearly, he's just seen it at the top of the list there. Clearly, the talking point of the week has been pretty well covered with Cornelius and Nick Rust earlier in the show. But we'll start with this list of 7, with Geldings. And should they be allowed more opportunities in elite Group 1 races like the Guineas, the Derby, the French Guineas, the Irish Guineas, the Arc de Triomphe?
Well, I can see the argument. It's clear what the argument is for Geldings to be barred from those races. Is it a bit of a pity? I just don't really... I suspect you're going to have a view on this, but I just don't see it as a particular issue. You've got lots of horses. You haven't got that many Geldings. If your entire horse is good enough, then it should be able to beat the Geldings. As it happens, from this year, the top 2 sprinters, I suppose, in Batash and also Sir Michael's horse, for Dream of Dreams, that they won't be actually represented in the future as far as the next generation is concerned. But they've got brothers and sisters. You've got the Rafe's horse that won yesterday, New Mandate. Does it really matter? I just don't see in 2020. I think in 1750 or 60, when it all got going, I can completely see it. But nowadays there are so many horses. There's so many horses in the various bloodlines. I've just got a feeling you don't agree with me.
You couldn't be more wrong. I mean, if there was a prize for wrongness this morning, you would win first, second, and third on this particular
I'd be trained at Ballydoyle.
So here's the thing: perpetuation of the breed is just as important now as it was in the 1700s. So
but
that
there were so many less horses then.
Is not applicable. It's easier to train a gelding than it is to train a colt, obviously, because they don't have the same testosterone and hormones in their system. It is more straightforward. You are simply incentivising trainers to geld horses if you say that you can run geldings in the Guineas and the Derby, because they can show their talent at varying different stages of their career. So I think it's absolutely crucial that the races that are stallion-making races are restricted to entire colts, and I wouldn't allow geldings in when there are plenty of other opportunities for the geldings.
Well, there's no suggestion they're about to be allowed, so it's not something that you're going to have to sort of try and become the next chief executive of the BHA in order to stop. I'm just not entirely certain. I can see the point now with so many horses around, whereas when those rules were made, there were so many less horses.
But of course, you might say at home, if New Mandate were in the Guineas, would it make it a more interesting race? And the answer, of course, is yes. But I try and see the bigger picture. Of course, a few years ago, this debate reared its head when Cyrus des Aigles was never allowed to run in the Arc because he was gelded. A horse who will be running in the Arc next weekend, to the surprise of quite a few, is Persian King, stepping up markedly in distance. We know he's a very good miler. He beat Pinatubo last time. This has been most underwritten and under-talked about story of the week, Cornelius. Andre Fabre, who's won the Arc 4,000 times... is 8 times, which is pretty remarkable, is running his best horse in the race he wants to win the most. And everyone's going, well, it's not going to stay, it won't win. It might.
Well, let's look at the evidence. On the dam side, she's by Dylan Thomas, I think. So that's obviously encouraging. Dylan Thomas, one of Aidan O'Brien's 2 winners of the Arc. Now, Persian King is by Kingman, and Kingman's stats for 1.5 miles plus are only 15 runners and only 1 winner. But Mole Davis, who's a fair horse, won a race at Hamilton. So that is Kingman. I think I'm right in saying
very few opportunities.
But it's not a representative sample, is it? And people have got into their mind perfectly reasonably mile, maybe mile and a quarter. So maybe we're just over. We are basing something on some evidence that doesn't really exist. But the crucial part of the whole thing is Andre Fabre, isn't it? If Andre Fabre is going to give this horse a go at the Arc, and the only races he's been talking about for this horse for a month are the Arc or the Champion Stakes. So that's a mile and a quarter. The horse has never won over a mile and a quarter either. But he's been when he won over when he was second in the Prix du Jockey Club. He was keeping going. Actually, if you looked at it without knowing any of the pedigree or any of the other performances, you think, well, a bit further might actually suit. So I think the Farb influence is so strong. He knows what it takes to win, and he adds a fascinating extra element to the race. So in terms of the Arc, we've got Enable, we've got Love, we've got Stradivarius, and we've got the highly talented Persian King. It's very exciting for 7 days hence.
And we've also got Mogul and possibly Serpentine, which we're going to talk about in a few moments' time. But Persian King is going to go to the Arc for a man who's won the race 8 times. And don't forget what he did with Manduro, winning Group 1 races at a mile and a quarter, and a mile
last
and a half.
year, no one really fancied, not that many people fancied Voldergeist, did they? And look what he achieved.
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's talk about Stradivarius, who needs a new rider because Andrea Razzani will be required the following week to ride at Future Champions Weekend for his retaining owner, Sheikh Mohammed Abeid. So he can't ride the horse. He's won on him 3 times before. Of course, Frankie can't ride him because he's riding Enable unless something happens to Enable. So where does John Gosden turn? Where would you turn if you were John Gosden?
Well, if I was framing a betting market on who will be riding Strad in the race, and I saw Frankie Dettori on television yesterday giving a big, obviously everyone was asking him about Enable, but don't forget Strad. Strad's going really well. I would have thought the 2 people at the top of the betting market would be Iretz Mendizabal and Olivier Pellier, two seasoned Longchamp Cavaliers, Chevaliers, Pellier having won the Arc on, I think, 4 occasions. Yep. Helicio, Pantraceleb, Sagamix and Salemia. The other rider hasn't actually won the Arc, but he's so experienced, and this is crucial. John Gosden will be remembering that just the other day the Prix du Jockey Club was won by Mishrif, ridden by him.
Yeah.
So I would have thought they're the 2 towards the top of the 2 right at the top of the betting for who'll ride.
John Gosden hinted that it might well be a French jockey who rides the horse.
So do you think
Robert Haviland's got any shot?
Well, he must have.
Given the fact he's been riding him all his work this season, hasn't he, as well?
And he is an absolute linchpin of the whole Gosden operation. However, perhaps that's the reason it's less likely to be him.
But if you know Bjorn Nielsen, you know that he'll take a view. Yes, he'll be guided by John Gosden, but he'll have his own view, and he will take that view.
Yeah. So that's why you'd be silly to have too big a stake on when I put the 2 guys at the top of the betting.
But who would you like to ride him?
I think I would love Mendizabal to be riding him. I think he ticks so many boxes.
And he does seem to be the sort of super sub rider for British trainers sending horses over, because he doesn't seem to have quite the attachments that a Boudot has or a Maxime Guillon. His availability is good, and there's a former
Guillon's
French champion.
Has Guillon got a novice? I'm not sure he's got a novice ride at the moment.
So PC will ride Persian King, presumably.
Yeah.
I'd have to look. I'm sure you'll be able to tell me.
And Tom Eaves is going over to ride Glass Slippers, I think, in the Abbey.
He won't be getting the ride on Stradivarius.
He won't be getting the ride on Stradivarius, but I can see him picking up some rides on or another ride on Arc Day.
And we ought to talk about Aidan O'Brien's Arc de Triomphe challenge, because it may not be restricted to Love, and he, to an extent, will be able to control this race, because he could have Serpentine supplemented, who ran a respectable race in the trials and has obviously done well, and Mogul.
Yeah, and there are some other possibilities. I think Santiago is probably still in there technically, isn't he? There are a number of possibilities. Everyone has talked about Love, but Mogul won that trial in good style the other day. Serpentine finished in 4th place, was beaten 4.5, 5 lengths, something like that. I thought Serpentine ran absolutely fine that day. There were some people who were disappointed, but clearly it was the Epsom Derby winner, and the 3-year-old colts, and their ability is under a certain amount of pressure as far as this year is concerned. So some were a little bit disappointed by Serpentine, but I thought after a long break it was a perfectly satisfactory return, and he's got to be supplemented, hasn't he, for the Arc? But that has definitely been mooted as a likelihood, I think, by Aidan O'Brien talking at the Curragh yesterday.
I'd say he might be ridden a bit differently than he was in the trial.
Yeah,
if he goes to the Arc,
absolutely. And Aidan is the Ballydoyle team is the greatest operation of its type in the world. But I was about to say he's only won 2 arcs, but by his standards, he fancies a few more. This is, obviously the Derby and all the UK Classics are really important. Obviously, all the Irish races and the Irish Champion Stakes and British Champions Day are really important. But the Arc has that iconic status, doesn't it? 1,000 people are only going to be allowed to go in, including, I think, everybody. So if you can get into the 2020 Arc, you'll be doing well. I wonder what the authorities at France Gallo are thinking, because I heard on the radio on the way here today that Roland Garros are only being allowed 1,000 people, and there was a terse response from the Tennis Federation in France about having only 1,000 people at Roland Garros this week because of the open spaces, because of all the measures that are going to be in place. I wonder whether Paris Longchamp will be a bit disappointed by that as well.
What we would give for 1,000 people on a British racecourse at the moment. Keane versus Foley is the way that the Irish Flat Jockeys Championship, I think soon to be renamed the Pat Smullen Irish Jockeys Championship, is playing out, and it's going to be a very interesting one as well. I think this is going to go to the wire.
Yeah, so we've got about 5 weeks to go. I would think the scores at the moment: Foley 72 and Keane 69. But Foley was miles clear, and Keane has absolutely stormed through the last few weeks, which isn't a massive surprise in that September, October have been good times of the year for Colin Keane in recent years. It's worth looking at the numbers. If you work backwards, I think in the last 3 Octobers, Colin Keane has had 18, 12 and 12 winners, while Shane Foley has had 2, 9 and 6. So it's probably not that surprising that it's Colin Keane who is favourite to actually come out on top and win a second championship.
And is that in part because of Joe Lyons and Jessica Harrington?
Well, it's worth looking at their numbers for October in recent years. The last 3 years for Joe, 13, 4 and 11 wins. So obviously he had one disappointing month for Jessie Harrington and team, 2, 2 and 5.
Interesting.
Colin Keane is favourite to win this, but it looks as though it could be nip and tuck. And Jockeys Championships do tend to capture the imagination, and we haven't really had a big one in this country. Probably, have we had one since Spencer and Sanders, really? And that ended up as a tie. Oisin Murphy has won last year.
Well, hang on, who did Jim Crowley beat? The year that he
he
won, that all got quite tight.
But I don't think it went. And Hughes and Hannigan used to get close as well. But because the flat season has been shortened in recent years, it hasn't had quite the same excitement as going right the way back when these Jockeys Championships people got right behind them. I remember when Peter Scudamore in the 90s was going for it one time, and they were following him. 10 o'clock news was folling him.
Steve Courtney and Pat Eddery was the famous one
of yesteryear.
Dittori and Fallon in 2004 was a very good
so
one.
There have been a lot. But in terms of this year, Oisin Murphy looks to have won the British one fairly comfortably. There's quite a good battle between Buick and Marquand for second. But in Ireland, Keane against Foley, Foley against Keane looks to be really exciting for the final part of the season.
Joe Fanning was 50 this week. How many winners has he ridden now?
Well, it's 2,500 plus.
He's on the list of top 10 of all time, isn't he?
Yeah. And only 2 jockeys riding at the moment have ridden 2,500 winners plus. The other clearly being Frankie Dettori. And we're talking domestically here. But I think the thing about Joe Fanning is that it's a fabulous story of an injured jump jockey languishing in a hospital bed after getting injuries as a jump jockey, losing weight, changing direction. He won on one of my, I can see it like it was yesterday, one of my favourite horses of the modern era was called High Flying, won the Northumberland Plate in 1992, trained by George Moore, but someone else had trained, Alan Harrison, I think, had trained it before. And Joe Fanning was a little-known rider, and that high-flying success in the Northumberland Plate in the early 90s put him on the map, put my bank balance in the black rather dramatically as well, I remember, at the time. And he's grown and grown since then, very closely associated with Mark Johnston. And Mark Johnston has lots of comments, makes lots of comments, as we know, and the general populace agrees with some, perhaps more than others. I don't think he would argue with that, but not one person disagreed with the comment when I remember him saying a few years ago now, Joe Fanning is worth his weight in gold as a stable jockey, a guy who's there, who's reliable. And whether you've followed him at Hamilton or at Newmarket on the lesser days or the big days, at Thirsk and Ripon and Redcar, all those kind of places, Joe Fanning has been such a reliable figure. So it's a great story, but it's also a great unsung story. And it almost seemed
Probably the way
appropriate.
he likes it, to be honest.
Yeah, it almost seemed appropriate this week. I gather there was a bit of a media circus with Frankie Dettori in Newmarket this week on the gallops one morning, obviously socially distanced, and he was talking about, because he's 50 quite soon, not being able to have a 50th party. On the same day, I think there was a photograph of Joe Fanning in the weighing room somewhere with a balloon above his place just saying 50 and a modest smile, and I'm sure he's celebrating as well, or will celebrate at some point, but he's a absolutely rock-solid member of British racing.
Yeah, well said. 2,500 winners and counting. We are celebrating the fact that racing returns to Nottingham racecourse this afternoon, and not before time. So this has been one of the courses that's been rotated by the Jockey Club because of the circumstances that we're in, which obviously leaves you a bit jittery because you sort of start worrying about what the intentions are further down the track. It's a great track,
awfully close to the centre of Nottingham. Great big wide open space. It's a very good racecourse, and there are those of us who lament the ending of jump racing at Nottingham, which finished, I think, in Timmy Murphy rode the last winner.
A while ago
and I
now.
think
It's
it was
about 20 years
90.
ago,
Longer. I think.
more.
I think I'd go for 95, 96. Was maybe the last jump season there. But as a flat track, and it's so big, the place, and only one code now being catered for, so there's lots of opportunities for the clerk of the course and for the ground staff there to make it a really good racing surface. Some people, I've heard people being critical about it, but on the whole, people really like. And it's a really fair racecourse. Doesn't that always strike you?
Very.
Yeah.
And
That's why it's such a good jumps track.
Yeah, if I was
Very similar to Newbury.
Jockey Club financial controller would start throwing things at the TV now, but I would seriously look at bringing jumping back to Nottingham.
So would I.
Because the likelihood, we've lost Folkestone, we've lost Windsor, we lost Nottingham, as you say. The likelihood is a few more jumps tracks are going to go. What's the future for Southall, for example, which is just down the road from Nottingham? What's the future for Southall's jumps track now? It's got to be pretty bleak. With eight fatalities.
And with respect to Southall, this is a much better track.
And as a jumps track, I think Southall's a fantastic all-weather venue, by the way, and the Fiver Stand really serves a really important portion of the horse population. But what's the future for Worcester's jumps track? And there's a lot of jumps tracks at Newton Abbot that are under threat. Yeah. It's probably about.
It'd be a great gesture, wouldn't it? The Jockey Club, the custodian of racing since the mid 18th century.
It needs to be financially viable.
Yeah, and clearly at the moment it's slipped down the list of. So stop throwing your things, financial controller, at the TV, because we're not suggesting it just yet. But maybe for the future, it's something to be thinking about. But it's great to see it back today. And you were talking about 2-year-olds this time of the year, the autumn, and getting excited for the future. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of excitement at Nottingham in the weeks ahead.
It's a great track. It may never get the biggest of crowds, but it's a really
serves its purpose brilliantly.
Does serve its purpose very well, and returns to your screens on Racing TV this afternoon. Those were this week's talking points. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.